In the heart of a cheerful neighborhood, Karen stood as the president of the Homeowners Association. With her clipboard in hand and a determined look on her face, she made sure that every patio sparkled with uniformity. From the moment she took on the role, Karen believed it was her mission to create a community that looked pristine and orderly. Her enthusiasm for rules was contagious, but not everyone shared her passion. Each week, Karen would stroll down the streets, inspecting patios like a fashion judge at a competition. A mismatched chair here or a vintage set there would earn a neighbor a stern notice and, often, a hefty fine. The neighbors, tired of her watchful eye, whispered about her strictness, but Karen brushed off their complaints. She thought it was all about keeping the neighborhood looking its best. Yet, beneath her tough exterior, Karen was not without her worries. She had grown fond of her approved outdoor furniture set, which she believed represented the height of style and conformity. But on one fateful day, dark clouds rolled in, and a fierce rainstorm swept through the area. As she watched the storm from her window, she felt a growing sense of dread. The next morning, she stepped outside to see her beloved furniture ruined. Little did she know that this disaster would soon turn her world upside down, a journey that would test her rigid adherence to the very rules she once enforced so harshly. In Karen's neighborhood, the rules of the Homeowners Association were not just guidelines, they were lifelines that held the community together. The most peculiar of these rules mandated that all front patios must showcase HOA-approved outdoor furniture. This strange stipulation meant that every home looked similar, with each patio adorned with the same brand and style, creating a uniform appearance that Karen thought represented pride and order. The residents often exchanged puzzled glances about the necessity of such a rule. After all, why should their choices be limited? Some neighbors cherished their unique styles, showcasing vintage sets or mismatched chairs that told stories of family gatherings and leisure. But to Karen, these personal touches were simply distractions that tarnished the neighborhood's polished look. Inspections became ritualistic. She would glide down the sidewalks, clipboard in hand, ready to issue fines for any deviation from the standard. As the sun shone brightly, she relished in her authority, convinced that strictness was essential for maintaining harmony. Yet, despite her authoritative demeanor, whispers of discontent filled the air. Neighbors began to feel stifled under Karen's watchful eye, longing for the freedom to express their individuality without fear of reprimand. Little did they know that soon Karen would confront her own rules in a way she never expected, one that might change her perspective forever. The storm had only just begun brewing, both in the skies above and within the confines of her strict regulations. Karen's determination to maintain uniformity in her neighborhood grew stronger with each passing day. She patrolled the streets like a hawk, clipboard in hand, ready to take note of any infractions against the HOA's strict furniture rules. Her eyes were sharp, and she had a knack for spotting mismatched chairs or vintage sets that did not conform to her idea of proper patio decor. Whenever she saw something that didn't meet her standards, her heart raced with a sense of duty and authority. She believed that enforcing these rules was essential for preserving the community's charm, and fines became her tool for maintaining order. Neighbors would often sigh when they saw her approach, knowing that a casual chat might turn into a stern lecture about compliance. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, loved to showcase her grandmother's vintage rocking chair on her porch. It held sentimental value for her family, but to Karen, it was an eyesore that disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic. After issuing Mrs. Thompson a fine for non-compliance, Karen walked away with a sense of accomplishment, convinced she was doing what was best for everyone. However, beneath this facade of authority lay a growing tension. Neighbors were starting to grumble about Karen's heavy-handed approach. While she reveled in her power, some residents began to plot ways to push back against what they saw as overreach. Little did Karen know that soon she would be on the receiving end of her own stringent regulations, a twist that would force her to reconsider what truly mattered in their community. The day started off like any other in Karen's neighborhood, but dark clouds began to gather ominously overhead. As the wind picked up, it became clear that a storm was brewing. Karen watched nervously from her window, knowing how important her outdoor furniture was for maintaining her image as the HOA president. She had spent a small fortune on her approved patio set, believing it was a testament to her commitment to the community's standards. As the rain began to pour, Karen felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. She rushed outside, hoping to cover her furniture, but it was too late. The downpour battered her patio set, and she watched helplessly as the raindrops pooled and soaked into the cushions, leaving them waterlogged and ruined. After the storm passed, she stepped outside to assess the damage, her heart racing at the sight of her once pristine furniture now looking like a soggy disaster. In that moment, panic set in. Karen quickly grabbed her phone and searched for the brand of her furniture, only to discover that it had been discontinued. She felt a wave of dread wash over her as she realized that if she replaced her ruined furniture with anything else, she would be violating her own strict rules. This unexpected dilemma left her feeling vulnerable and exposed, forcing her to confront the very policies she had enforced with such authority. Little did she know, this storm would not only damage her furniture but also shake the foundations of her rigid beliefs about conformity and control. Karen felt a sense of dread wash over her as she sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop. After the storm, she had hoped to quickly find a replacement for her ruined outdoor furniture. With determination, she typed the brand name into her search engine, expecting to find an online store or perhaps a nearby retailer that carried the same approved line. Instead, what she found sent her heart sinking. The brand had been discontinued. Panic set in as she reread the search results, confirming what she feared. There were no alternatives that met the HOA's strict standards, and the realization hit her hard. If she wanted to stay in compliance with the rules she had enforced so rigidly, she had no legal options for replacement furniture. Sitting on a folding chair for the next few months felt like a cruel joke, especially since she had been so quick to fine others for similar infractions. In that moment, Karen found herself at a crossroads. She recalled all the fines she had issued to neighbors who dared to stray from the approved styles. Now she was trapped in a situation of her own making, a victim of the very rules she held so dear. The weight of her authority felt heavier than ever as doubts began to creep in about whether strict adherence to appearances was truly worth the cost. A sense of vulnerability began to replace her previous confidence, nudging her toward the tough decision of how to handle this unexpected predicament. Days turned into weeks as Karen sat in her folding chair, staring at her empty patio where her beautiful furniture used to be. Each time she glanced at the sad, makeshift setup, a knot of embarrassment twisted in her stomach. She felt like a hypocrite, a title she never thought she would bear. It was one thing to enforce strict rules on others, but now she found herself in violation of the same policy she had rigidly upheld. The realization hit her hard: if she used any furniture that wasn't from her approved brand, she would be breaking the very rules she had imposed on her neighbors. The weight of hypocrisy loomed over her like a dark cloud, and it gnawed at her conscience. As she watched her neighbors enjoy their unique sets, she could see the joy and personality they brought to their patios. Meanwhile, there she was, stuck with a folding chair that felt more like punishment than a place to relax. Karen's frustration grew with each passing day as she tried to come up with solutions. She considered begging the HOA board for leniency or perhaps finding a way to justify using non-approved furniture. But deep down, she knew it would mean admitting that the rules were flawed and that her rigid enforcement might have gone too far. This moment of vulnerability was unfamiliar territory for Karen. For so long, her authority had been unchallenged, but now, facing this dilemma forced her to confront not just the rules but also the impact they had on community spirit and individuality. With each passing day, the desire for change began to stir within her, quietly challenging everything she once stood for. As Karen sat in her folding chair, grappling with her predicament, she received an unexpected knock at the door. It was a member of the HOA board, clipboard in hand and a serious expression on their face. Karen's heart sank as she realized what was coming. The board member informed her that she was being fined for non-compliance with the very rules she had enforced so diligently. The irony of it stung deeply. The once powerful enforcer now found herself on the receiving end of a fine. Your patio furniture is not approved, and as per HOA regulations, we must impose this fine, the board member stated matter-of-factly. Karen felt a rush of embarrassment wash over her, the weight of hypocrisy heavy on her shoulders. She tried to explain her situation, detailing how the storm had ruined her furniture and how the brand was no longer available. But the board member remained unmoved, citing that even with these circumstances, rules were rules. While she listened to the board member recite the reasons for the fine, frustration boiled inside her. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. She had spent so much time policing others for similar infractions only to find herself trapped by her own policies. As the door closed behind the board member, Karen realized that this fine was more than just a monetary penalty, it represented everything she had fought for and lost. In that moment of humiliation, a realization began to dawn on her: perhaps the strict enforcement of rules was not worth sacrificing community spirit and individual expression. This new perspective stirred within her a newfound determination to seek change, not just for herself but for all residents who felt constrained by rigid regulations. For months, Karen sat on her folding chair, an uncomfortable reminder of her predicament. Each day, she watched her neighbors enjoy their outdoor spaces, filled with colorful furniture and vibrant decorations that showcased their personalities. Meanwhile, her own patio felt like a prison, stark and uninviting. The folding chair, designed for temporary use, became a symbol of her isolation. At first, she tried to maintain her former authority despite the embarrassment she felt. She would greet neighbors with a forced smile as they passed by, but deep down, she knew they could see the irony of her situation. Each time she heard laughter or saw a neighbor rearranging their patio decor, it struck her like a reminder of what she had lost, both her furniture and her standing in the community. As the days turned into weeks, Karen began to feel alienated from her neighbors. Those casual conversations that once flowed easily now felt strained. The very individuals she had once fined for their choices were now living their lives freely, while she was stuck adhering to rules that had started to feel more like shackles than standards. In moments of quiet reflection, Karen couldn't help but wonder if her strict enforcement of the HOA rules had truly benefited the community or just served to elevate her own sense of control. She felt a growing desire to connect with her neighbors again, to understand their joy instead of resenting it. This new awareness stirred within her a longing for change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under the weight of rigid regulations and conformity. As Karen continued to sit in her folding chair, she found herself increasingly lost in thought about the impact of her once unchallenged authority. The vibrant laughter and colorful decorations of her neighbor's patio seemed to haunt her, reminding her of the joy and individuality she had stifled through her strict enforcement of HOA rules. With every cheerful gathering she witnessed, a growing realization dawned on her: her rigid approach had created barriers between her and the very people she was meant to serve. Karen began to reflect on the fines she had imposed on residents for displaying mismatched chairs or vintage sets. In her quest for uniformity, she had ignored the personal stories and memories that those items represented. Each piece of furniture was a reflection of its owner, yet she had reduced their homes to mere appearances, prioritizing compliance over community connection. The thought weighed heavily on her heart, sparking feelings of guilt and regret. She recalled the many conversations that had turned sour when neighbors felt belittled by her authority. With this newfound perspective, Karen recognized how her actions had fostered resentment rather than harmony. It struck her that community spirit thrived on acceptance and diversity, not rigid standards. Feeling a deep yearning for reconciliation, Karen considered approaching her neighbors with humility. Perhaps it was time to acknowledge her mistakes and seek their input on how to create a more inclusive environment. With each passing day, she felt a stronger desire to bridge the gap between herself and her community, hoping to foster understanding instead of fear, an opportunity for growth not just for herself but for everyone in the neighborhood. With a newfound sense of purpose, Karen decided it was time to take action. She spent several days gathering her thoughts and reflecting on the changes she wanted to propose to the HOA board. It was essential for her to communicate not just the need for a repeal of the uniform outdoor furniture rule, but also how this change could foster a sense of community and inclusivity among neighbors. On the day of the board meeting, Karen felt a mixture of nerves and determination as she entered the conference room filled with familiar faces. The atmosphere was tense, with board members seated around the table, ready to discuss various issues. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and began to outline her vision for a more flexible approach to patio decor. "Today, I stand before you not just as president but as a neighbor who has learned from experience," she said, her voice steady but sincere. "I've come to realize that our strict adherence to uniformity has stifled the spirit of our community. Each home is unique, and we should celebrate that diversity rather than suppress it." As she continued, Karen shared her own journey. The embarrassment of being fined and forced to reflect on her policies had been eye-opening. She urged the board to reconsider their stance on outdoor furniture rules, emphasizing how allowing individual expression could bring neighbors closer together. By showing vulnerability and humility, Karen hoped to inspire others to join her in creating a more welcoming neighborhood. This moment marked a significant shift for Karen. No longer was she just an enforcer of rules but an advocate for unity and understanding among residents. After Karen's heartfelt presentation to the HOA board, word of her change of heart spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Initially, some neighbors were skeptical. They had grown accustomed to seeing her as the strict enforcer of rules and felt uncertain about her newfound willingness to embrace flexibility. However, as they gathered in small groups to discuss what she had proposed, a sense of curiosity began to blossom. At a nearby park, residents shared their thoughts over coffee and pastries. "I never thought I'd hear Karen say that," one neighbor remarked. Others began to chime in, recounting how they felt stifled by the uniform rules that left no space for personal expression. Conversations shifted from skepticism to hope. Many residents began to share ideas about how they could create a more welcoming environment for everyone. Some suggested a community meeting to explore options for updating the furniture regulations while still maintaining a cohesive look. Others offered to showcase their unique design ideas as examples of how diversity could enhance the neighborhood's charm rather than diminish it. As discussions unfolded, Karen was pleasantly surprised by the enthusiasm and creativity bubbling up among her neighbors. They expressed excitement about collaborating on new rules that celebrated individual tastes while bringing a fresh sense of unity to their community. Karen's efforts had sparked a movement toward inclusivity, and with each conversation, she felt more connected to her neighbors than ever before. This transformation marked a turning point not only for Karen but for the entire neighborhood, as they began to reimagine what it meant to live together harmoniously, where differences were celebrated, and every voice mattered. As the discussions continued, Karen felt a wave of relief wash over her. The transformation she had hoped for was beginning to take shape, and it filled her with a sense of belonging and hope. She realized that her journey was not just about changing the rules, it was about fostering empathy and understanding within her community. The rigid standards she once upheld seemed trivial now compared to the vibrant tapestry of personalities and stories that each neighbor brought to their homes. In the following weeks, Karen collaborated with her neighbors to draft new guidelines that honored individual expression while still maintaining a sense of cohesion in the neighborhood. They organized community events where residents could showcase their unique styles, encouraging everyone to participate and share their ideas. Karen found herself enjoying these moments, laughing and bonding with those she had once kept at arm's length through her strict enforcement. Through this process, she learned valuable lessons about the balance between rules and personal style. While some structure was necessary for community harmony, it should never come at the cost of individuality or connection. She understood that empathy played a crucial role in leadership, allowing her to support her neighbors in expressing themselves freely. As Karen walked through the neighborhood one sunny afternoon, she looked around at the diverse array of outdoor decor, colorful chairs, whimsical art pieces, and cozy loungers, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The community was thriving in a way she had never imagined possible. In embracing change, both in herself and within the neighborhood, Karen discovered that true unity lies in celebrating differences rather than enforcing conformity.